In a world where innovation constantly collides with tradition, few moments capture the essence of that clash better than a heated debate between two of the biggest names in entertainment and technology. Today, we witness a battle of egos, ideas, and perspectives that no one could have predicted. Tom Cruise, the Hollywood legend, faces off against Elon Musk, the visionary entrepreneur, in an explosive showdown on live television. What starts as a simple conversation soon turns into a war of words, with Musk exposing Cruise in a way that leaves the studio speechless. Make sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date with the most intense moments in TV history. The bright lights of the studio flickered overhead as the audience settled into their seats, excited for what promised to be an entertaining broadcast. The View was always known for its lively debates and heated exchanges, but no one could have predicted what was about to unfold. Today's episode featured two of the biggest names in Hollywood and business: Tom Cruise, the globally recognized actor known for his high-octane films, and Elon Musk, the enigmatic billionaire CEO of SpaceX and Tesla. Both had come to discuss a new collaboration, but tensions between the two men were already building long before the cameras started rolling. For weeks, rumors had swirled about a rift between the two icons. Cruise, a well-established figure in Hollywood, had often been seen as a symbol of classic American heroism: brave, unstoppable, and larger than life. Musk, on the other hand, represented the future: innovation, disruption, and a man who thought differently, sometimes to the point of controversy. The two had crossed paths before, but today's meeting was more than just a conversation about business. It was a stage for something much bigger. As the cameras began to roll, the host's voice cut through the tension, welcoming the audience and introducing the two stars. "We have a special episode today," she began, "with two legends from completely different worlds, Tom Cruise and Elon Musk." The applause from the audience was electric, but there was an undeniable buzz of anticipation. Everyone knew that these two men had always had differing views on more than just business. The conversation started off innocuously enough, with Cruise talking about his latest film project and Musk sharing his visions for the future of space exploration. But it didn't take long before the cracks in their relationship began to show. The more they spoke, the more it became clear that their differences weren't just about the work they did. They were about the way they saw the world. As Cruise praised the need for traditional methods of leadership in Hollywood, Musk's face tightened. He wasn't one for conventional wisdom. "I think the problem with the industry right now," Musk interrupted, "is that people are too busy following outdated formulas. We need to think bigger, beyond the old paradigms. Look at what's happening in tech. Disruption is where the future lies, not sticking to what's always been done." Tom Cruise's eyes narrowed slightly. "Well, Elon, you can't always just disrupt everything," he replied, trying to keep his tone steady. "Sometimes tradition, experience, and structure are what make things work. You can't just toss everything out the window." Musk, unfazed, leaned forward. "I'm not suggesting we throw everything out, but if you don't evolve, you stagnate. It's not just about business. It's about thinking. Something the film industry often overlooks. You can't keep relying on the same old star power tactics forever." The tension between them was palpable, and the audience could sense that this wasn't just a friendly debate anymore. The conversation was spiraling into dangerous territory. Suddenly, Elon Musk's voice lowered. "Tom," he said, his tone sharper than before, "with all due respect, what you're saying sounds more like a defense of the status quo. We don't need more of the same. We need change." The room fell still. The hosts exchanged glances, but they couldn't cut the tension with a knife. The audience, on the edge of their seats, knew they were witnessing something monumental. Would this be just another celebrity debate? Or was this the beginning of something much larger? The studio went silent as Musk's words hung in the air. Tom Cruise's posture stiffened. The tension between them was no longer just a difference in opinion. It was personal. For a moment he simply stared at Musk, as if weighing his response. The once confident and jovial Cruz, known for his larger-than-life presence, now seemed to shrink in the face of Musk's cold logic. The host, sensing the moment of escalation, quickly tried to steer the conversation back on course. But Musk wasn't having it. "Look, Tom," Musk began, "I respect what you've done in your career, but it's a bit outdated. What you represent, this idea of classic Hollywood, it's a system that's dying. People are looking for more. They're looking for something real, something that breaks the mold." Tom's jaw clenched, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Was this a challenge to his entire legacy? The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of where this was headed. Cruz had always been the one to define his own image, but now, here was Musk, a disruptor, calling it all into question. Outdated? Cruz finally shot back, his voice calm but with an edge that cut through the silence. "I built a career on hard work, on being someone people can look up to. You think you can just rewrite the rules with your fancy tech and big ideas?" Musk's eyes narrowed. "It's not about rewriting rules, Tom. It's about recognizing when the system is broken. And the system you're clinging to? It's falling apart." His words were sharp, delivered with the kind of cold certainty that left no room for debate. Cruz's hands balled into fists on his lap. The energy in the room shifted from discomfort to something more charged, like the calm before a storm. He wasn't used to being challenged so openly, especially not on live television. His reputation as a man of action, someone who faced every obstacle head-on, was being directly attacked, and that wasn't something he was willing to let slide. "Look," Cruz said, leaning forward, his voice now low and measured. "I've worked my entire life to get to where I am. I don't need lessons from you, Elon. You're not the only one who understands the value of pushing boundaries." The tension was unbearable. The studio lights seemed to grow brighter, the cameras zooming in on their faces as the confrontation escalated. It wasn't just a debate anymore, it was a battle for dominance. And neither man seemed willing to back down. Musk, his calm demeanor unwavering, wasn't finished. "I'm not here to give lessons, Tom. I'm here to show you that the world has moved on. Your time as a part of the old guard is coming to an end." His voice was steady, but the message was clear. Musk had come to make a point, and nothing was going to stop him. The hosts were visibly tense now, exchanging nervous glances. Could they regain control of the conversation, or had they just witnessed the start of a televised train wreck? The audience, once eager and excited, now sat in stunned silence. No one had expected things to take such an aggressive turn. The entire dynamic had shifted in an instant. Was this the end of Tom Cruise's reign as a Hollywood icon? Was Musk really offering a glimpse of the future, or was he merely tearing down the past for the sake of his own agenda? The battle had only just begun, but already the stakes were higher than anyone could have imagined. The room was thick with tension, the kind that's so heavy you can almost feel it in your chest. The cameras, capturing every movement and every word, only added to the sense of unease. Musk, though unfazed, was pressing forward, his calm demeanor masking the ferocity of his argument. Tom Cruise, on the other hand, looked visibly shaken. This wasn't just a debate anymore. It was becoming personal. "You don't get it, do you?" Musk continued, his voice steady but sharp. "This industry, this whole way of thinking, it's built on a foundation of ego, of star power. People like you think they can just coast on their reputations, but that's not what the world needs anymore. The world needs real change." His words were cutting, almost surgical in their precision, and they seemed to wound Cruise more deeply than any criticism of his acting skills ever could. Cruise's face flushed a shade of red that was unmistakable. He had built an empire on his image, his charisma, his ability to draw audiences in, and his reputation as one of Hollywood's most powerful and influential figures. And now here was Musk, tearing it all down with just a few well-placed words. The sting of it was palpable. The more Musk spoke, the more Cruz seemed to shrink under the weight of it. "You talk about disruption, Elon," Cruz replied, his voice shaking ever so slightly. "But I've been disrupting this industry for decades. I've pushed boundaries in ways you can't even imagine. You think you can just waltz in here and rewrite history because you've built a few companies? It's not that simple." But Musk wasn't done. He leaned in, his gaze never leaving Cruz's eyes. "You're right," Musk said, his voice now tinged with something colder. "It's not that simple. And that's the problem. You're too stuck in your ways to see that the world has moved on from you." The words hit like a slap, hard and swift. The audience, once full of eager anticipation, now sat in stunned silence. There was no applause, no laughter, just an uncomfortable quiet that filled the studio. It wasn't just a celebrity feud unfolding before them. It was a cultural reckoning, a battle between two opposing forces, one that had defined the old world, and one that was trying to shape the new. Cruz's hands tightened into fists on his lap, his jaw clenched so hard that the muscles in his face were visibly tensed. He had never been one to back down from a challenge, especially not in front of a live audience. But this was different. Musk wasn't just questioning his choices, he was questioning his entire identity. And that hit harder than any of the critiques he had received over the years. In an attempt to regain some control over the conversation, Cruz let out a breath and stood up slightly, leaning toward Musk. "You don't know anything about me, Elon. You don't know what I've sacrificed to get here. You think it's all just a game? Well, I've lived the consequences of those choices." His voice was growing louder now, frustration bubbling over. "You can sit there and talk about your fancy rockets and your plans to save the world, but I've been saving my own world for a lot longer than you've been on the scene." The tension in the room reached a boiling point. The host, who had been trying desperately to interject and cool things down, finally spoke up, but it was clear that the damage had already been done. The confrontation between these two titans was no longer just a debate. It had become a battle of egos, and neither man was willing to relent. Musk, still seated, remained calm, almost disturbingly so. He didn't flinch. He didn't back down. His next words, when they came, were quieter, but no less cutting. "Tom, you talk about saving your own world, but maybe it's time to face the truth. The world you've built is crumbling, and you're too proud to see it." The words landed with a cold finality. The studio fell into a silence so thick that it almost seemed suffocating. Tom Cruise, the man who had always commanded the room, was now left speechless. The blow had been struck, and for the first time that afternoon, it was clear that Elon Musk had gained the upper hand. The words hung in the air, heavier than any of the flashy stunts or explosive moments Cruz had ever starred in. For the first time, the legendary actor seemed to stumble, not physically, but mentally. His usually sharp, calculated presence on stage faltered, and the audience could feel the shift. They had come expecting a clash between two powerful forces, but no one anticipated the sheer force of Musk's verbal assault. Cruz took a step back, his mind racing, trying to regain control over his own narrative. It wasn't just the sting of Musk's criticism. It was the fact that this battle was about something far bigger than personal achievements or movie roles. This was about the future of the world, and Musk, with his cold logic, had positioned himself as the one who held the keys to that future. But Cruz, despite his momentary hesitation, was not someone who would go down without a fight. He had spent his entire career taking on larger-than-life challenges, whether on screen or in his personal life. This was no different. His eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched, and he stood up taller, shaking off the doubt that had briefly crept in. "You think you're the only one with vision?" Cruz asked, his voice now filled with determination, though tinged with the unmistakable edge of frustration. "You think that just because you've built a rocket or two, you somehow have the Monopoly on innovation? He paused, letting his words sink in. Let me tell you something, Elon. I didn't get to where I am by waiting for the world to change. I made it change. Musk's expression remained unreadable, his face a mask of calm. He didn't respond immediately, but his presence alone was enough to keep the tension at a fever pitch. The audience could almost feel the clash of wills between these two men, two forces pulling in different directions. Cruise, representing the old guard of Hollywood, a man who had crafted his own destiny through sheer willpower and charisma. Musk, the harbinger of a new age, someone who saw the future in ways most couldn't even imagine. I didn't wait for the world to change, Cruise continued, his voice rising in intensity. I changed it. I've worked harder than anyone to get where I am. I didn't rely on tech. I didn't rely on some new fad. I built my career with blood, sweat, and determination. For a moment, the audience was unsure how Musk would react. Would he back down? Would he apologize, realizing the weight of his words? But instead, Musk's response was calm, almost eerily so. You're right, Tom, he said, finally breaking the silence. You didn't wait for the world to change. You built your world. But the problem is, your world doesn't exist anymore. His words were blunt, but they hit with the force of a hammer. It's over. Your time is over. The room seemed to freeze, and for a moment it felt like time itself had stopped. The cameras zoomed in on Cruise, his face pale, his expression unreadable. Was this the end of the line for Tom Cruise? Had Musk just declared the curtain to fall on one of Hollywood's biggest stars? Cruise's eyes flashed with something, perhaps a mixture of disbelief and rage, but he quickly regained composure. His shoulders squared, and his voice steadied, as if realizing that this was the defining moment, the moment he would either rise or fall. You can't just erase everything I've done, Elon, he said firmly. I've earned every bit of success. You think you can just come in and tell me that my world doesn't matter? Well, I'm not going down without a fight. Musk didn't flinch. In fact, he seemed almost bored, as though Cruise's words didn't affect him in the slightest. I'm not here to erase anything, he said, leaning back in his chair. I'm here to tell you the truth. And the truth is, it's over. The old guard has to step aside. If you can't see that, you're only delaying the inevitable. The tension in the studio was unbearable now. The hosts were speechless, the audience collectively holding its breath. This wasn't just a battle between two famous individuals, it was a representation of the old world fighting against the new, and in this moment, it seemed like the new world was winning. Tom Cruise had always been a fighter. But was this the one battle he couldn't win? As the final words of their clash echoed through the studio, a hush fell over the room. Tom Cruise stood there, visibly shaken. His shoulders slumped slightly as the weight of the confrontation seemed to settle in. For the first time, the world saw a side of him that had always been hidden behind his on-screen persona. He wasn't invincible, and today, Musk had shown the world just how fragile that carefully crafted image could be. But the true turning point hadn't arrived yet. The final move was about to be made, and it would either solidify Musk's triumph or give Cruise a chance to reclaim some of the power he had almost lost. Cruise took a deep breath, visibly gathering himself. The cameras, still rolling, captured every moment, as if they knew the importance of what was unfolding. For a second it seemed as if Cruise might bow out, as though he was going to let Musk have the final say. But then, with the kind of intensity only he could muster, he spoke again, his voice much quieter, but no less fierce. You're right, Elon, Cruise said, his tone shifting from anger to something more resigned. Maybe my time is over. Maybe the world has moved on. But that doesn't mean I'm finished. It just means I've got to change with it. The audience, holding their collective breath, waited for Musk's response. Would he have the last word, or would Cruise find a way to turn the tide? Musk, sitting calmly in his chair, studied Cruise for a long moment. It was almost as if he were considering something. The audience, though they hadn't expected a change of heart, were now wondering whether Musk was prepared to acknowledge the grit and determination Cruz had shown throughout his career. "You're a fighter, Tom," Musk finally said, his voice unexpectedly calm. "I'll give you that, but don't waste your time fighting the wrong battle. The world doesn't need the old ways anymore." Cruz nodded slowly, acknowledging the truth. In Musk's words, his pride was still intact, but now there was a quiet understanding between the two men. The battle for Hollywood's future wasn't going to be won in a single conversation, but it had been a crucial first step. "Maybe you're right," Cruz said with a small smile, the tension in his body easing slightly. "But there's one thing I know for sure. You don't change the world by sitting on the sidelines." The final exchange between them hung in the air for a moment as the hosts finally found their voice. The awkward silence that had pervaded the room began to dissipate, and the tension seemed to break, though not entirely. The truth was that this clash, this moment, wasn't really about Hollywood or technology. It was about the struggle for relevance in a rapidly changing world. And in that sense, both men had been right and wrong. Cruz's moment of vulnerability, admitting that the world had changed and that maybe he had to change with it, felt like a small victory. Musk had won the argument, but Cruz had reclaimed his dignity. It wasn't the triumphant comeback that fans might have expected, but in some ways, it was more powerful than that. The cameras panned over the faces in the studio, capturing the wide-eyed expressions of those who had witnessed a moment they would never forget. It was a turning point for both men, for Hollywood, and for the future of the entertainment industry. As the show wound to a close, the hosts wrapped up the segment, but the echoes of that confrontation would linger long after the cameras turned off. For Cruz and Musk, the debate wasn't just about who was right or wrong. It was about who could survive in a world that was changing faster than anyone could keep up with. And in that moment, both men had shown the world exactly how far they were willing to go to hold on to their place in it.